Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Heal and Shift. I'm your host, Sunita Passi, and I am delighted today to introduce Andrew Mason. Just a bit of background on the podcast itself. So during the pandemic, a time when many of us were, mental health and well-being had never been more in the spotlight, I launched the podcast. And on this podcast, have been interviewing health visionaries, forward-thinking leaders, alongside those expert guides, you can say, who are helping us on our journey to optimal well-being. So today, I'm delighted to be joined by Andrew. And Andrew's an expert in Eastern alchemy. He actually started studying holistic medicine 20 years ago and completed his training as an Ayurveda practitioner in 2006. He then undertook a unique and intensive apprenticeship in the East, learning the closely guarded processes involved in the manufacturing of these ancient remedies. And since his return to the UK, Andrew's been undertaking the task of recording and cataloguing these traditional processes. He's written a number of books. He also teaches widely. He's actually my teacher when I also completed the training as an Ayurvedic practitioner, and we were just trying to figure out what that year was, and we think it was 2017. So welcome, Andrew. Delighted to see you today. So just if you can give our viewers an overview, what awakened your interest in Ayurveda, first of all?
Okay, well, thank you for inviting me. Well, it's a bit of a long story, really. I'll try and shorten it as best I can. I wasn't interested in alternative medicine at all, really. I come from a sort of more arty graphics kind of background. And I managed to have a minor sort of motorcycle accident, and damaged my knee quite badly, and just went through the whole rigmarole of, like we all do, going to the GP and having the assessment, and just it wasn't getting any better, and it just, things were going on and on and on. It was getting more and more painful, and I started to think, I wonder if there's something else I could be doing to support that while I was going through treatment. And a guy I was working with at the time used to spend a lot of time in India, and he came back one time and he threw this paperback at me. He said, I brought you this. I thought you might like it. It'd be right up your street. And it was about, an introductory to Ayurveda. Now, this is way back in the sort of probably 96, something like that. And I read it. And of course, it's very alien and I didn't understand any of it. But I knew that instinctively knew there was something there. You could just see or feel something from it. So I thought, okay, I'll investigate this a little bit. And that's what got me into it, really. I think from there I just hopped and found another book, and another book I'd read. I think Atreya Smith had just published his book around that time, and then David Frawley had quite a lot of good books out. And then I saw David Frawley was offering a correspondence course in Ayurveda, so I took that. And you can only go so far with those things, but it was a good introduction. I felt I had a good amount of information under my belt. And then I saw that they were running a full-time course in London, every weekend. So I decided to sign up for that, and that was a four-year course at the weekends. And then it offered I think the last year there was a sort of internship of 3 months. And I decided I think I got close to the internship period. I completed the training and then got close to the end. And then I thought, well, somehow, I know it sounds a bit silly, but India is a big place, and I come from a little island, so I couldn't sort of mentally make the jump to think, well, I want to sort of strand myself in India for months on end. So a lot of the teachers at that time, or my teachers at college, were Sri Lankans. So I thought, well, maybe I'll try Sri Lanka. I'll try that as a footstep. Go there first, see if I like it, and if it gels, then I can maybe do other things. So a year before I was due to, or when my other class colleagues were going to go to India, I went to Sri Lanka sort of a year ahead. And while I was there, I just got it was just me, one guy in a little clinic in the middle of Colombo. It was all a bit crazy, but it was fun. And I met and saw lots of amazing things. And the young doctor there sort of took me under his wing and showed me lots of things, took me off into the jungle, saw all these kind of crazy places you just wouldn't be able to see unless you were local. So it was a great experience. And the last day I was going to leave, he took me to the local hospital, Ayurvedic hospital, and there was a lady there who specialized in the alchemical work. And as soon as I saw that, I thought, that's it, I'm hooked. It looks so fascinating. And I'd always had a sort of vague interest in alchemy. You know, we all like those stories of magic and sorcery, and you know, sort of just kind of, it was there, and seeing it that it was actually a living tradition. They were actually using and preparing. I mean, not turning lead into gold, but I mean, they are technically alchemical remedies because they use minerals, metals, gemstones. And then that was it. And then I decided to, you know, I basically decided I needed a good amount of time to do that. So when I eventually did do my internship, I opted for a longer period. I stayed there almost 1 year, and kind of dedicated myself to that. So that's my inroad into Ayurveda, and this particular form of Ayurveda known as Rasa Shastra. So Rasa is kind of, it has many meanings, but one of them could be like immortality, longevity, youthful. And then the Shastra is like to study or to have knowledge of. So it's like a knowledge of longevity or something like that. But there are many other interpretations for that word, but that's how I got into that particular.
I think it's fascinating because you know, just as you were talking, I've got this image of you going into the forests and, you know, and preparing these healing medicines, and you know, and this we know is how medicines were produced for thousands and thousands of years until we have, you know, what we have today. You know, modern medicine, Western medicine. So can you give us an example of some of the things that you saw that really connected you, that you really resonated with it, you know, and you just got a deeper insight into the power actually of making medicines in this way?
I think initially, I mean, I was because my trip coincided with the tsunami as well. So that literally happened the next day after I arrived there. So the whole island was pretty much in chaos. There was just stuff happening everywhere. So, you know, accessibility wasn't a problem. I was just a Westerner wandering around who didn't know what he was doing. So I could pretty much get into everything without being stopped. So I was being invited here and there, you know, where all normal protocols were being broken. I was able to see a lot of things that I normally perhaps wouldn't get to see. And so I guess you could answer this in two ways. Firstly, you've got the production side, and then you've got the actual clinical side. So I'll explain the production side. So what's really interesting about Rasa Shastra is it doesn't really require a huge amount of equipment to do it. In a way, it's very primitive, but it's also very sophisticated. So all of these traditions have some equivalent. Like in the West, we had our Western alchemy, like Paracelsus and all these guys. And then in China, they have their own form of alchemy. In Burma, they have their own. I mean, you can go anywhere, then there'll be some kind of alchemical tradition. What's interesting about the Ayurvedic tradition, or what became attached to the Ayurvedic tradition, is that its processing is very, very simple. It uses very crude things. It's literally clay pots, holes dug in the ground, burning cow dung to, you know, there's a lot of production that uses high temperatures. So this will either be done by just burning cow dung in a pit, or it will be blown with air, and you'll burn it in a furnace, and you'll put remedies inside crucibles. So the temperature ranges are all over the place. You could be anywhere from just regular boiling and cooking in a pan like we all do at home, right up to melting copper. You know, you're up to sort of 1200 degrees. And if you're working with irons and liquefying them, and even higher, maybe 1500 degrees. But the equipment is super simple. I mean, even making the crucibles is all made by hand. So it's just literally some clay, some broken pots that have already been fired, that are ground again, mixed in with the clay. And then use a bit of grass, which acts as a sort of a matrix to hold everything together. And then a little bit of sand, and then it's fired. And then, you know, and then if that pot breaks, it will be then ground. And that's what I like, that sort of recycling element. Everything has a use. I mean, even the cow dung, after it's burned and you recover the ashes from the pit, they'll wash the ashes, you'll separate the salts from the ash, and then you'll burn or cook off the water, and you'll be left with the cow salts. And even those can be used in another remedy. So everything has a use. It's sort of super simple. There's not a high level of sophistication. But it's just the methodology is interesting. It's very it's very kind of it's intense. You know, you'll go over and over and over. They'll prepare something many, many times, and their philosophy is that the more times you apply these principles, the finer it becomes. The idea is you're reducing the particle size to something that's so small it can literally slip in between every cell. You know, it can go into the cells, go to the deepest level of the body. So you know, it's their accessibility and availability to the body that's important. Of course, you know, on top of this, we have all the regular stuff like our medicated ghees, medicated oils, all the regular Ayurvedic and the herbal side, and that's not to be discounted. That's a highly big and important part of the system. But it's just that the kind of alchemical stuff is, you might think of it like the sort of nuclear weapons. It's like what you hold in reserve, but you use if you have to. You know, sometimes it may be necessary to use something stronger if somebody has particularly with chronic ailments. It's much better for chronic ailments, rejuvenative, you know, fertility, some of those things where you're dealing with the deeper tissues in the body. It's not sort of superficial, so you need something to go deep to really work well.
I remember when you were teaching us on our retreat, and it was in France, so we're going back a good few years now. And we were out, I think we were out there for a week, or maybe a week and a half, something like a couple of weeks, something like that. And so we started right at the beginning. And the process, because so many things had to come into it to get it right as well. So the fermentation of all of the ingredients, the light, that was really important, wasn't it? So the level of detail in preparing these, you know, healing medicines is, you know, this is very different to what we see from Western medicine, which is basically made in a lab. So can you tell us something a little bit more about that dynamic, like, you know, about you know, this collective working together with basically all the elements?
Yeah, I suppose the West, we're kind of into splitting things, separating and purifying. So we look at we take an element of we find a plant that has a medicinal chemical, and we work very hard to separate that chemical out and then use it. But the problem with, if it's not being supported, there's no synergistic effect anymore. There's nothing there to balance it. And most plants, or even animal products, or even the minerals to some extent, will have balancing elements in them that will help mitigate some of the side effects. So that's why we tend to get a lot of side effects, because we're taking out extracts which are quite strong. In the Ayurvedic tradition, or this Rasa Shastra tradition, they still have purification, but their purification actually adds things, not takes them away. So in a sense of being purified, it's actually becoming more compound. But the idea is that you're adding, it's a qualitative medicine. So you're adding qualities into it. So for instance, let's take red coral. So coral is a good blood builder. It's a tonic, you know, it repairs and builds the body. It builds muscle tissue. It does all kinds of amazing things. And it has a very cooling energetic. So to enhance the cooling properties of it, it might be mixed with, say, rose water. It'd be ground with rose water. So rose water is always already a cooling, emoliating liquid. It's very good for the eyes. It takes heat out of the skin. It cools the blood. So by adding rose water to red coral, you're making it cooler. And then what you would do is you would maybe in between, because it's not a totally 24/7 process. You'll grind these things for a certain amount of time and then leave them to dry, and then you'll add more liquid and begin. So in between, in that drying period, they would leave it under the moon. So you leave it particularly under a full moon, because the full moon, again, was seen as a very cooling, nurturing, stabilizing element. So that would be impressed on the mix, and it would add even more cooling and energetic to it. So it's kind of this qualitative thing. You know, you're looking at things that have a similar quality and bringing them together. And then you might put one thing in there that's slightly the other way, so if you make it too cooling, it could be too cold. So you might add like one remedy or one herb that was slightly warming, just to offset all that coldness, because you don't want it too cold. And so it's kind of based on that idea. And, you know, there are many, many ways that it depends what you're reducing. If you're working with a toxic plant, for instance, so let's take something like aconite. It's quite a well-known toxic plant. So in the West, you know, we use this quite a lot until, you know, about 50 years ago. I mean, it was being used by herbalists, but obviously it's a restricted herb now. But it has an amazing effect on particularly on the vision, on the eyes. It's called like the arnica for the eyes, if you like. It sort of heals the eye. It's good for the heart. It's good for blood. You know, it does all kinds of amazing. It's a rejuvenative, but of course it's highly toxic. So there's a procedure to go through before that plant can be then made accessible or given as a remedy. So, for instance, it will be soaked first of all. You'll harvest the root or the daughter root. They separate the two roots, so each one has a different energy. You have a mother root and a daughter root, so you separate those two out, and they have their own effects. So you take one of those roots, and it's put into a solution of mustard seed oil and rock salt, and it will be left for 1 season to mature in that. And that's the first part of the purification. Then it's brought out, it's washed, it's skinned, chopped, and then it's boiled in milk, or you boil it in cow's urine, believe it or not, which is cow's urine is a highly used liquid in Ayurveda. I mean, we all kind of turn our noses up and go, ooh, but I mean, it's incredible. It does amazing things. So it's boiled in that, and then it's dried, and then it's powdered, and then it will be mixed with something like black pepper, which is a kind of a nervine, so it's a tonic for the nerves, and that sort of protects or mitigates again some of the effects that the residual effects of the aconite might still have on the nervous system. And then that can be given as a remedy in very, very small doses, of course. And it works very well. And you can see results from these things very quickly. And they're used all the time. It's quite a common ingredient that you'll find in many, well, not a lot, but it's in a good number of Ayurvedic remedies.
How many people, I mean, I know in India, Ayurveda, we see many hospitals and clinics, and it's well practiced there, and also Sri Lanka as well, also in Nepal, but here less so. So how accessible, how many practitioners are actually working with the traditional healing Ayurvedic medicines that you're talking about, not on surface level, but, the stuff that really gets into chronic conditions?
You mean in the UK or in Sri Lanka?
In the UK.
That's a difficult one to answer. I mean, obviously, the most people are going to go for off-the-shelf products because it's easy, isn't it? And you've got a certain amount of safety there because obviously they've come through a production method. There's a batch number, you can trace it, and you hope that all the checks have been done. I'm not quite sure what the current situation is in the law. I think if you do a face-to-face consultation, you are allowed to prescribe things that you've made yourself. But that obviously you'd have to look carefully about some of these ingredients because they are toxic. But just general medicines, I don't know a lot of people. I know a few, maybe a handful of people that will prepare some oils, some medicated oils, maybe some medicated ghees. That's partly because I've probably spoken to them and they got excited about seeing it done, or they've done a workshop and think, oh, I can make that. It's not actually that difficult. And these things, that's why I said these things aren't that difficult to make. You just need time and patience. And once you've got good at it, it's not actually a tedious process. It's actually quite enjoyable to make them because you're kind of completing the circle. You're not only giving the end and giving the medicine, seeing the end result, you've actually instigated you've started the preparation yourself, and the intent is already there with the medicine, isn't it? You're making this medicine with the intent of healing somebody. So it's getting the sort of full energy on everything you're doing. It's just a nice thing to be able to do the whole thing.
Well, I mean, what's interesting is you're completely demystifying this process, that some may think, these kind of ancient remedies, it's very difficult. This isn't something easy to do. Hence, we've got a whole new system. The last 200 years, we've obviously seen the Western system, escalate and scale really all over the world. So when you sort of, when you think about how, the majority of us, if you are diagnosed with a chronic condition and you're going down that route, where does this alchemy have its place? What can you see? What's your personal vision on this?
I can only speak from personal experience. But when I was in Sri Lanka, I saw these remedies being given, and they were usually for quite serious conditions. All the things that the sort of major diseases of the world, particularly things like arthritis or stuff like that, that got really entrenched, and they were having difficulty removing it from the body, or sort of pulling the undigested, the ama, the toxins from the body. They would use these rasa because they're able to penetrate deeply and work quickly. Probably it would be more difficult to use some of them in the West because obviously, there's a big variety of materials. They go from being pretty inert and not too difficult. I mean, you can have something as simple as chalk or limestone, which is virtually, I mean, it's in your water anyway. When you run your tap, you've got limestone in there. So those things are fine. And then you're moving into the animal products, which are like conch shells, or just think about it as seashells. And then you've got animal horns, like deer horn and things like that. That's not so bad because it's kind of still close to us. But then you start moving into some of the minerals and it gets more difficult. Now we're okay with things like sulfur, but obviously, you know, some of the toxic material, you've got like your arsenics and the mercuries and all those kind of things. And people go, you know, mercury, arsenic. Yes, I mean, all these things are used. They have their place, and there's a very strict regime to prepare them. These are not common or garden remedies. I mean, you're not going to be able to buy these off the shelf with ease. I mean, they're probably out there somewhere, and I would always exercise caution when buying anything like that. But yes, they are used and they are powerful. And, you know, we use them ourselves. I mean, the turn of the century, a lot of these remedies were still being used in the kind of Victorian pharmacopoeia. You'd find all these things, but we've since kind of moved all those out and we've got all our new drugs, you know. So I think I was pretty impressed with what I saw. I mean, it's like anything, isn't it? It's like you can't say there's a cure-all. I mean, there's always going to be cases that are difficult and more sustained or require a change of protocol. But a lot of the cases I was seeing there were people who are coming in with quite chronic ailments. And what they would do is they would actually reformat the body. So they would start with a cleanse. So they would give them a sort of a small panchakarma treatment, you know, just cleaning the tissues, keeping them in for a couple of weeks, you know, strict diets and all that kind of thing. And then once the tissues were kind of clean and all the elimination channels were working well, you know, they were able to pass stools and urine okay, and they were sweating and all that kind of stuff, then they would start building their internal fire back up, you know, their digestive capability. And then they would start issuing these rasayanas, these rejuvenative drugs, including these, you know, these alchemical drugs. And you'd see quite, you know, the strength would come back quite quickly. You know, they would build the tissues quickly. And yeah, I mean, I took stuff while I was there as well. I mean, I got quite sick while I was there because I was there for a year and eating local food, and I wasn't used to all this spice, and I got quite sick. My immunity got pretty low. It's getting a lot of, you know, kind of infections, you know, because it's sort of hot and damp all the time. But I tried a few of these all-up stuff, trying it while I was there, partly out of curiosity, and I found it to be quite effective as well. So it's a great tool in the tool as a cure of everything. It's not like the be all and end all, but it's a nice tool in the toolbox.
Yes, a nice tool in the toolbox. I like that. Yeah, that's a nice way of looking at it. And it's one aspect of Ayurveda. When we're working, you know, from an Ayurvedic perspective, it's working in a completely, you know, 360-degree holistic approach. And you were just there, just basically taking us through that whole approach, where we've got you know, we've got preparation of the body, you know, actually having some therapies and loosening the tissues and starting to really open up the channels, and then once you're clear on that, then you can start to introduce these specific medicines. And then I like to think of it as like a really deep detox, you know, it's getting right into all the different you know, pathways and channels and srotas in the body. Where does this, how do we tell more people about this? Where does this system have its place? You know, what's the future of Ayurveda in the West?
It's getting really popular. I mean, I get more and more emails every week, people asking me all kinds of questions, really, from all over the world. I mean, America, South America, Europe, the Far East, you know, just people are really interested in it. They're just kind of more aware that perhaps the modern, or what we call Western medicine, isn't servicing all their needs. I mean, don't get me wrong, you know, Western medicine has its place. I mean, it's incredibly good for acute conditions. It's like if I got run over by a bus tomorrow, the last thing I need really is homeopathy, although I could take a little bit of homeopathy as well. But if I've got a broken leg, it's not going to fix that straight away. So it has its use, but I think where we've got it's the chronic long-term conditions, things that we're not very good at curing, people where we're just really managing, aren't we, in the West? We're just giving them, you're just managing the condition, and you're just living as long as you can, pain-free. So I think these kind of drugs offer us a chance to rebuild the tissues on a sort of molecular level, you know, reset the clock. Now, of course, it is case specific. You can't just say one size fits all. You can't say taking one of these drugs will heal everything. but when used the right way and following the right protocol, they can be incredibly effective. You know, there's a lot that they can do. So I think it's great that that there's an awareness coming back in. People seem to be more aware of it. Every time I do another talk, there's always somebody there who knows more about it than the talk I did before. It's almost like it's becoming part of the mainstream consciousness, isn't it? People are waking up to the idea that there's something out there.
Yeah.
And of course, you know, a lot of people have been doing this for years. There's a big Western tradition in alchemy, and they've been making alchemical remedies for a long, long time. And again, you know, that's another tradition, the Western tradition. So that's another side. Every culture has its tradition. I think what makes Ayurveda special is that it's a living tradition. It's still used everywhere, and it's still pervasive in the whole system. There are still many books on it. It's still being taught, and it has Ayurveda as well. It's not like, say, the alchemical Western tradition. You know, I don't know what it would be relying on for its model. Maybe it's more like the Galenic. You know, they're using the humours or something but I haven't really heard people say that. Generally, if you speak to them, they'll say this is a gold remedy, this is good for the heart, and anyone can take it. But Ayurvedically, we would look and say, okay, so we'd look at the dosha, we would look at case histories, we would look at, you know, the Prakriti, all these things. So that's what makes Ayurveda such a strong force to be reckoned with, because it's not just one thing that you're giving, it's a whole package, and there are 8 limbs, and you can specialize in any one of them. And together they're quite a formidable host. You know, if you bring all those together, it's a lot, isn't it? Like we said, the Panchakarma, you've got the rejuvenatives, you've got the herbals, you've got, you know,
diet.
There's so much stuff. It's massive.
Massive. Absolutely, yeah. Well, I mean, what's interesting is you know, I'm certainly, you know, from my networks, and also, you know, what I see happening out there in the West is that we've got more Western mainstream doctors who are certainly becoming more well versed in the holistic aspects. So really starting to you know, recommend mindfulness and meditation techniques and yoga for certain patients. And I guess that next stage is maybe for you know, more also to embrace you know, this type of medicine as well. That would be an interesting stage, I think. Because it's the integration, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. And also you've got like the Western herbal tradition as well, which is now, they've spent a long time getting used to the Ayurvedic herbs. I know a lot of Western herbalists I now use Ayurvedic herbs, but maybe there's time for a bit of a cross-pollination now. Maybe some of the Western herbs should be coming back into the Western Ayurvedic tradition. We could integrate those in some way. Then there's not all this big backwards and forwards flow of herbs across the planet. You know, India having to export so much of what it's got. I mean, I've never found the actual quote in Charaka, but apparently it says in there, you know, you should always try and use stuff that's
local,
indigenous.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that you know, that takes us back to sustainability and actually looking after our planet. Absolutely. We just really need to be sharing that information and making that more widely recognized as well. Now, Andrew, you have a workshop coming up. So Ayurvedic Alchemy, a practical introduction to preparing healing medicines. And this is very soon, actually, 15th to the 17th of August. And you're running it at the Earth Spirit Centre in Somerset. So tell us a little bit about this, and then we'll put all the links for anyone who's interested to sign up as well. What will we learn?
Well, on the Eventbrite page, it will give you specifics, but let's just say that it's going to be in 3 parts. So the first part will be a kind of a slideshow to get people introduced so they can see what's going on, get a little bit of history about the system. The biggest and the middle section will be the real hands-on stuff. So it's very kind of practical. I mean, you can do as much as you want. You can come and just watch, or you can come and get your hands dirty and really muck on in. So we'll try and tackle as many things as possible. Obviously, time is always a problem with these things, because you allow lots of time and it just goes so quickly. So probably we'll try and do a few regular Ayurvedic preparations. We'll just do a few medicated ghees, medicated oil, maybe even a herbal wine if we get enough time. And then that'll be alongside some of the simpler alchemical preparations as well. So because some of the oils and ghees take time to prepare while they're kind of bubbling, if you like, bubbling and cooking, then we can come back and work on other things. So it should be a good progression through. At least it will give you a good understanding of how things work and why we do the things we do. And then the last part will just be like a summing up. We'll be going back to look at all the things we prepared the day before, and then, you know, how to package them, how they would be traditionally used, how to store them. You know, that's another great thing about these remedies. They have no shelf life. So, you know, literally once you've made them, they last forever. So,
I know, and that's really the magic of it, isn't it? That
that's a big one.
You could learn, you know, if you learn the processes, you could do sort of the beginning of the year, do a big batch for your family, your friends, your neighbours, just in case, and have it stored.
I guess very small quantities as well. You don't need, it's tiny amounts.
Yeah. No, amazing, wonderful. Well, thank you very much. So we'll share the links to that, and just for those who want more information on you, you've got a YouTube channel which is under Netta Alchemy, is that right?
Yeah,
and then also your website is Netta Publishing.
Yeah. If you go to the blog section, I've got lots of videos in there. That's just I was working with a university in Vienna a couple of years ago. They commissioned me they found some really old Ayurvedic texts, sort of 10th century, and they said, "Oh, wouldn't it be good if we actually remade what they're saying in those texts?" So we did a reconstruction of those 10th century texts. So on the blog page, you've got all videos about how we did that. So that's kind of fun. It's actually trying to make gold and silver. It was quite fun. So I didn't do it. I didn't make gold and silver. But.
Yeah, and that's no mean feat. So if you can make that, you know, and that's one of the great things about the way that you teach, is it is very engaging, and for something that's quite an academic subject, you know, there's a lightness to the way that you teach it. So if you are free and you want to learn more about preparing healing medicines, then do join Andrew for the workshop 15th to the 17th of August, so coming up very soon. And Andrew, thank you so much for your time. Delighted to speak to you.
Thank you.
Have a good catch up as well. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much.